Hi, I'm Chris Andrew, and I'm going to be reading you The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. It's a chapter book, so what I'll be doing is starting off with the preface. Here we go. An extraordinary series of events took place in my life, beginning in December 1966, during my junior year at the University of California at Berkeley. It all began at 3:20 a.m. when I first stumbled upon Socrates in an all-night gas station. He didn't volunteer his real name, but after spending time with him that first night, I named him after the ancient Greek sage. He liked the name, so it stuck. That chance encounter and the adventures that followed were to transform my life. The years prior to 1966 had smiled upon me, raised by loving parents in a secure environment. I was later to win the World Trampoline Championship in London, travel through Europe, and receive many honors. Life brought rewards, but not lasting peace or satisfaction. Now I realize that I had, in a sense, been sleeping all those years and just dreaming I was awake, until I met Socrates, who came to be my mentor and friend. Before that time, I always believed that a life of quality, enjoyment, and wisdom were my human birthright and would be automatically borrowed upon me as time passed. I never suspected that I would have to learn how to live, that there were specific disciplines and ways to see the world I had to master before I could awaken to a simple, happy, uncomplicated life. Socrates showed me the error of my ways by contrasting them with his way, the way of the peaceful warrior. He constantly poked fun at my own serious, concerned, problematic life until I came to see through his eyes of wisdom, compassion, and humor. And he never let up until I discovered what it means to live as a warrior. Often I sat with him far into the early morning hours, listening to him, arguing with him, and in spite of myself, laughing with him. This story is based on my adventure, but it is a novel. The man I called Socrates did, in fact, exist, yet he had a way of blending into the world. So it's been difficult times to tell where he left off and other teachers and life experiences began. I have taken liberties with the dialogue and with some time sequences and have sprinkled anecdotes and metaphors into the story to highlight the lessons Socrates would want me to convey. Life is not a private affair. A story and its lessons are only made useful if shared. So I've chosen to honor my teacher by sharing his piercing wisdom and humor with you. Chapter 1, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Warriors we call ourselves. We fight for splendid virtue, for high endeavor, for sublime wisdom. Therefore we call ourselves warriors. I'm really going to apologize. I can't say this name. It's probably Neuchamuch Angutara Nikea. Sorry. The gas station at Rainbow's End. Life begins, I thought, as I waved goodbye to Mom and Dad and pulled away from the curb in my reliable old Valiant. It faded white, body stuffed with the belongings I packed for my first year of college. I felt strong, independent, ready for anything. Singing to myself above the radio's music, I sped north across the freeway of Los Angeles, then up and over the Grapevine, connecting with Route 99, which carried me through the green agricultural flatlands stretching to the foot of the San Gabriel Mountains. Just before dusk, my winding descent through the Oakland Hills brought me a shimmering view of San Francisco Bay. My excitement grew as I neared the Berkeley campus. After finding my dormitory, I unpacked and gazed out the window at the Golden Gate Bridge and the lights of San Francisco sparkling in the darkness. 5 minutes later, I was walking along Telegraph Avenue, looking in shop windows, breathing the fresh Northern California air, savoring the smells drifting out of tiny cafes, overwhelmed by it all. I walked the beautifully landscaped paths of the campus until after midnight. The next morning, immediately after breakfast, I walked down to Harmon Gymnasium, where I'd be training 6 days a week 4 muscle straining, somersaulting, sweaty hours each day, pursuing my dreams of becoming a champion. 2 days passed and I was already drowning in a sea of people, papers, and class schedules. Soon the months blended together, passing and changing softly like the mild California seasons. In my classes, I survived. In the gym, I thrived. A friend once told me I was born to be an acrobat. I certainly looked the part. Clean cut, short brown hair, a lean, wiry body. I'd always had a penchant for daredevil stunts. Even as a child, I enjoyed playing on the edge of fear. The gymnastics room had become my sanctuary, where I found excitement, challenge, and a measure of satisfaction. By the end of my first 2 years, I had flown to Germany, France, and England, representing the United States Gymnastic Federation. I won the World Championship. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I won the World Championship. My gymnastics trophies were piling up in the corner of my room. My picture appeared in the Daily California with such regularity that people began to recognize me and my reputation grew. Women smiled at me. Susie, a savory, unfailingly sweet friend with short blonde hair and a toothpaste smile, paid me amorous visits more and more often. Even my studies were going well. I felt on top of the world. However, in the early autumn of 1966, my junior year, something dark and intangible began to take shape. By then, I'd moved out of the dorm and was living alone in a small studio behind my landlord's house. During this time, I felt a growing melancholy. Even in the midst of all my achievements, shortly thereafter, the nightmares started. Nearly every night I jerked awake sweating. Almost always, the dream was the same. I walk along a dark street. Tall buildings without doors or windows loom at me through a dark, swirling mist. A towering shape cloaked in black strides towards me. I feel rather than see a chilling specter, a gleaming white skull with black eye sockets that stare at me in deathly silence. A finger of white bone points at me. The white knuckle bones curl into a beckoning claw. I freeze. A white-haired man appears from behind the hooded terror. His face is calm and unlined. His footsteps make no sound. I sense somehow that he is my only hope of escape. He has the power to save me, but he doesn't see me and I can't call to him. Mocking my fear, the black-hooded death whirls around to face the white-haired man, who laughs in his face. Stunned, I watch. Death furiously makes a grab for him. The next moment, the specter is hurtling toward me as the old man seizes him by the cloak and tosses him into the air. Suddenly, the Grim Reaper vanishes. The man with the shining white hair looks at me and holds out his hands in a gesture of welcome. I walk around him, then directly into him, dissolving into his body. When I look down at myself, I see that I'm wearing a black robe. I raise my hands and see bleached white gnarled bones come together in prayer. I'd awake with a gasp. One night early in December, I lay in bed listening to the howling and wind driving through a small crack in the window of my apartment. Sleepless, I got up and threw on my faded Levi's, a t-shirt, sneakers, and down jacket and walked out into the night. It's 3:05 a.m. I walked aimlessly, inhaling deeply the moist, chilly air, looking up into the starlit sky, listening for a rare sound in the silent streets. The cold made me hungry, so I headed for an all-night gas station to buy some cookies and a soft drink. Hands in my pocket, I hurried across campus, past sleeping houses. Are you still paying attention? Before I came to the light of the service station, it was a bright fluorescent oasis in a darkened wilderness of closed food joints, shops, and movie theaters. I rounded the corner of the garage adjoining the station and nearly fell over a man sitting in the shadows, leaning his chair back against the red tile station wall. Startled, I retreated. He was wearing a red wool cap, gray corduroy pants, white socks, and Japanese sandals. He seemed comfortable enough in a light windbreaker through the wall thermometer by his head registered 38 degrees. Without looking up, he said in a strong, almost musical voice, "Sorry if I frightened you." Oh, that's okay. Do you have any soda pop?" "Only have fruit juice, and don't call me Pop." He turned toward me and with a half smile removed his cap, revealing shining white hair. Then he laughed. That laugh. I stared blankly at him for one more moment. He was the old man in my dream. The white hair, the clear, unlined face, a tall, slim man of 50 or 60. He laughed again. In my confusion, I somehow found my way to the door marked office and pushed it open. Along with the office door, I had felt another door opening to another dimension. I collapsed onto an old couch and shivered, wondering what might come screaming through that door in my orderly world. My dread was mixed with a strange fascination that I couldn't fathom. I sat breathing shallowly, trying to regain my previous hold on the ordinary world. I looked around the office. It was so different from the sterility and disarray of the usual gas station. The couch I was sitting on was covered by a faded but colorful Mexican blanket. To my left, near the entryway, stood a case of nearly organized traveler's aids, maps, fuses, sunglasses, and so on. Behind a small dark brown walnut desk was an earth-colored corduroy upholstered chair. A spring water dispenser guarded a door marked "Private." Near me was a second door that led to the garage. What struck me most of all was the home-like atmosphere of the room. A bright yellow shag rug ran its length, stopping just short of the welcome mat at the entry. The walls had recently painted white, and a few landscape paintings lent them color. The soft, incandescent glow of the lights calmed me. It was a relaxing contrast to the fluorescent glare outside. Overall, the room felt warm, orderly, and secure. How could I have known that it was to be a place of unpredictable adventure, magic, terror, and romance? I only thought then a fireplace would fit in nicely here. Soon my breathing had relaxed, and my mind, if not content, had at least stopped swirling. This white-haired man's resemblance to the man in my dream was surely a coincidence. With a sigh, I stood, zipped up my jacket, and sallied forth in the chill air. He was still sitting there. As I walked past and stole a last quick look at his face, a glimmer in his face caught mine. His eyes were like none I'd seen before. At first they seemed to have tears in them, ready to spill over. Then the tears turned to a twinkle, like a reaction of the starlight. I was drawn deeper into his gaze until the stars themselves became only a reflection of his eyes. I was lost for a time, seeing nothing but those eyes, the unyielding and curious eyes of an infant. I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been seconds or minutes, maybe longer. With a start, I became aware where I was. Mumbling a good night, feeling off balance, I hurried toward the corner. When I reached the curb, I stopped. My neck tingled. I felt like that he was watching me. I glanced back. No more than 15 seconds had passed, but there he was, standing on the roof, his arms crossed, looking up at the starry sky. I gaped at the empty chair, still leaning back against the wall, then up again. It was impossible. If he had been changing a wheel on a carriage made from a giant pumpkin drawn by a huge mice, the effect could have been any more startling. In the stillness of the night, I stared up at his lean shape and imposing presence even at a distance. I heard the stars chime like bells, singing in the wind. Suddenly he snapped his head around and stared directly into my eyes. He was about 60 feet away, but I could almost feel his breath on my face. I shivered, but not from the cold. The doorway where reality dissolved into dreams cracked open again. I looked up at him. "Yes," he said. "Can I help you?" Prophetic words. "Excuse me? But You are excused, he smiled. I felt my face flush. This was starting to irritate me. He was playing a game with me, but I didn't know the rules. All right, how did you get up on the roof? Get up on the roof, he queried, looking innocent and puzzled. Yes, how did you get from the chair? I pointed up to the roof. In less than 60 minutes. You were leaning back against the wall, right there. I turned, walked over to the corner, and you. I know exactly what I was doing, his voice boomed. There's no need to describe it to me. The question is, do you know what you were doing? Of course I know what I was doing. I was getting angry now. I wasn't some child to be lectured to, but I desperately wanting to find out the old man's gimmick. So I held my temper and requested politely, please, sir, tell me how you got up on the roof. He just stared down at me in silence until the back of my neck began to get prickly. Finally, he replied, use the ladder. It's around the back. I walked quickly around the back. Sure enough, there was an old ladder leaning crookedly against the back wall. But the ladder's top was at least 5 feet short of the roof's edge. Even if he could have used it, which was highly doubtful, that wouldn't explain how he got up there in a few seconds. Something landed on my shoulder in the darkness. I gasped and whirled around to see his hand. Somehow he'd gotten off the roof and crept up on me. Then I guessed the only possible answer. He had a twin. They obviously got their kicks scaring the wits out of innocent visitors. I accused him immediately. All right, mister, where's your twin? I'm nobody's fool. He frowned slightly, then started to roar with laughter. Ha! That clinched it. I was right. I found him out. But his answer made me less sure of myself. If I had a twin, do you think I'd be the one wasting my time standing here talking with nobody's fool? He laughed again and strode back toward the garage, leaving me standing open-mouthed. I couldn't believe the nerve of this guy. I hurried to catch up with him. He walked into the garage and started to tinker with the carburetor under the hood of an old green Ford pickup. So you think I'm a fool? I said, sounding more belligerent than I intended. We're all fools together, he replied. It's just that a few people know it, others don't. You seem to be the one of the latter types. Hand me that small wrench, will you? I handed him his damn wrench and started to leave. Before I left, though, I had to know, would you please tell me how you got up the roof so fast? I'm really puzzled. He handed me the back wrench, saying, the world's a puzzle, no need to make sense of it. He pointed to the shelf behind me. I'll need the hammer and the screwdriver now, over there. Frustrated, I watched him for another minute, trying to figure out how to get him to tell me what I wanted to know, but he seemed oblivious to my presence. I gave up and started toward the door when I heard him say, stick around and make yourself useful. Deftly removing the carburetor like a surgeon in the middle of a heart transplant, page 10. He sat down carefully and turned to face me. Here, he said, handing me the carburetor. Take this apart and put pieces in that can to soak. It will take your mind off your questions. My frustration dissolved into laughter. This old man could be irritating, but he was interesting too. I decided to be sociable. My name's Dan, I said, reaching out to shake his hand, smiling insincerely. What's yours? He placed a screwdriver in my outstretched hand. My name doesn't matter, neither does yours. What is important is what lies beyond names and beyond questions. Now, you will need this screwdriver to take apart that carburetor, he pointed. Nothing lies beyond questions, I retorted. Like, how did you fly up on the rooftop? I didn't fly, I jumped, was his poker face reply. It's not magic, so don't get your hopes up. In your case, however, I may have to perform some very difficult magic. It looks as if I'm going to have to transform a jackass into a human being. Who the hell do you think you are? I'm a warrior, he snapped. Beyond that, who I am depends on who you want me to be. Can't you answer Oh, I'm so confused. Can't you just answer a straight question? I attacked the carburetor with a vengeance. Ask me one and I'll try, he smiled innocently. The screwdriver slipped and I skinned my finger. Damn, I yelled. Going to the sink to wash the cut, he handed me a Band-Aid. All right then, here's a straight question. I determined to keep my voice patient. How can you be useful to me? I've already been useful to you, he replied, pointing to the bandage on my finger. That did it. Look, I can't waste my time here any longer. I need to get some sleep. I put the carburetor down and got ready to leave. How do you know you haven't been asleep your whole life? How do you know you're not asleep right now? He said, watching intently. Whatever you say. I was too tired to argue. One thing though, before I go, how did you pull off the stunt? You know, on the... Tomorrow, Dan, tomorrow, he interrupted. Then he smiled warmly, and all my fears and frustration dissolved. He reached out and clasped my bandaged hand. Soon my hand, my arm, then my whole body started to tingle. He added, It's been pleasure seeing you again. What do you mean again? I began, then caught myself. I know tomorrow. Tomorrow. We both laughed. I walked to the door, stopped and turned, stared at him, said goodbye. Socrates. We will stop it there until tomorrow. We're on page 11. Dan Millman, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Story that changes lives. Kukstum kauch.